Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
So we'll leave this relatively short because we're going into now week 2 of our two-part megazode with our friend Jim Johnson, project manager for Star Trek Adventures at Modiphius. Obviously, we've talked about the Utopia Planitia Sourcebook. We talked about Discovery. We're going to talk about Discovery. There's so much. And again, like we both mentioned last week, this could have been a 3 or 4 episode arc just based off of how much we talk. And Jim is always generous with time.
Yeah, he really is.
He has said, when he schedules with us, he doesn't schedule anything else because he knows that we'll just get talking and you're hearing a piece of it. We try to be cognizant and start relatively soon within him joining, but we inevitably talk for a chunk of time afterwards.
Yeah, we really do.
And I'll be honest, we've always talked about this. We don't ask for inside spoiler info.
No.
We never get inside spoiler info.
No.
So what we talk about is really, for the most part, stuff that could be recorded and put out there. So we aren't talking about anything so it's literally, we arbitrarily say, okay, we need to stop. Otherwise
we have to ask all the questions we want to talk about again.
Yes.
Right. And, I think, Brad, anyone who listens to us regularly knows we're interviewing people like Jim, not because we want spoilers for anything. We are interested not in the products. We're interested in the creative process behind those products, whether it's a source book, whether it's, I think of interviewing Nami so long ago now, right? And her Star Trek Prodigy soundtrack. Whether it's source books or music or any other creative endeavor, right? Interviewing Travis about Legends and Lattes, right? We'll happily go out and buy whatever it is. We want to know how did it arrive? What is it about? And so in the second half of our interview with Jim, so again, depending on your reckoning, like if you're someone who's into like imaginary numbers or whatever, then this is either, or the quote unquote new math, this is either the second half of his third time on the podcast, or as you'll hear by his reckoning, the fourth time he's on the podcast. And you know what? We're comfortable with that because we like
I'm totally okay with that. Yeah.
Totally worth it. It will definitely not be his last one. But you know what, guys, and gals and everyone else, we just need to jump into it because the second piece of the interview, it runs long and Jim had so much to share. It's absolutely fascinating and it was enjoyable as always for us. So we're going to call it here. We're going to get over there so that you can hear more from Jim, and then we'll see you in a little while. Jim Johnson is the author of the Pistols and Pyramids series, the Potomac Shadows series, and other prose fiction series currently under development. He has written sundry other pieces of fiction, including several stories published in the Star Trek universe, and has freelanced for pen and paper role-playing game companies, including Modiphius, Star Trek Adventures, Decipher, the Lord of the Rings RPG, and White Wolf, Mage the Ascension. Jim lives in historic Alexandria, Virginia, with his wife, toddler, and a pair of crazy cats.
So last week, we talked a lot about Utopia Planitia, the new Sourcebook coming out from Modiphius for Star Trek Adventures. Obviously, I have a sneaking suspicion we might come back to it again, just by the nature of Jason and I's pure fanboyish behavior when it comes to it. But before, right after we had you, probably a couple of weeks, you announced the Discovery Sourcebook for seasons 1 and 2. Right? I had seasons 1. I don't have the book in front of me right now.
Right.
So if you don't mind talking about, I know obviously there's a lot of Discovery content. You focused this on the first 2 seasons. How did that come to be?
Well, I think more than anything else. Oh, first of all, thanks for having me back on the show again. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Long time no see. Thanks.
Yeah.
We'll probably have to have an offline discussion about whether this counts as 4 episodes. Or
I think it does.
Oh,
I think it does.
oh, damn it! We've got to start saving up for that smoking jacket. Okay.
Mhm.
I want to make sure I got enough hash marks on my wall.
That's fair.
Is this 3? Is this 3 episodes, or am I actually
No.
4, you know?
I think
It's
I think it
4.
counts
Oh
as
my
4.
God.
It counts as 4.
I want to get ahead of your next guest, who's going to be getting like 2 or 3, because I think you've
That's
had at least
right.
a couple of guests who've been on twice, and I just
Yeah.
want to get ahead of the curve. But anyway, so in answer to your question, I think the Discovery book, I don't want to say we got lucky, but I mean, we monitored the show, right? And I think it was just a natural break by virtue of what the Discovery producers did with their series. Like I don't think anybody was expecting season 2 to end with Discovery bouncing 700 years into the future and then never coming back, right? Like so season 3, season 4, no spoiler warning, they don't come back to the 22nd century. They stay in the 32nd century. And I think so we were working on the core book. I think Discovery was announced when the core book came out. In fact, I think Discovery season 1 started like a month or 2 after the core book came out. So like we kind of knew Discovery was coming, but we had no idea what the subject matter was, other than the fact it was Star Trek, right? We were as surprised as everybody else when we actually watched the series. So as we were developing the game, I mean, this is 6 years ago, we were watching Discovery, of course, and we didn't have the license at the time, so we couldn't do anything with it other than just enjoy it as fans. But I think somewhere along the way, when season 2 ended, and then we got and I don't even remember the time. The COVID's completely screwed up my sense of time and how things fell into place. But I think once we realized that season 1 and 2 were kind of a self-contained chunk of time for the franchise and for the series, and then they jumped 700 and something years into the 32nd century, and it was clear that they weren't coming back ever. And that told me as like just a Star Trek fan and also as the project manager, if we wanted to do something with Discovery to take advantage of the fact that we've got the license, we should focus on the first 2 seasons, because there's a certain amount of what do you call it? It's not script immunity, but there's a certain amount of safety working with those 2 seasons, because the producers aren't really going to look too closely at our stuff and say, well, hey, what are you doing? You can't do that, because we might be doing that in our next episode. Like we didn't have to worry about it, because like, okay, you know what? You're 750 years into the future. We're just focusing on the first 2 seasons with Burnham and Giorgio and Pike and Spock and stuff. We're gonna play in that part of the series. You keep doing your thing. Like we're not gonna get in your way. You're doing the canon stuff. And so we kind of pitched it, and they were like, oh, sure, yeah, do whatever you want with the first 2 seasons. Don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay, right. That tells us in the back of our mind, oh, they're not going to go back to the 22nd century. So that's really kind of where my thought processes came together for the Discovery development. Is like, okay, I'm working on the outline, and I knew that we weren't going to be going into the 32nd century, so I could just focus on what we saw in the first 2 seasons. And then that really gave me the impetus to put the outline together and say, okay, you know what, writers, we have an opportunity here to do something that the producers of Discovery couldn't do or were not focused on. And it's like, we can take everything from Enterprise and the original series and, all the other canonical stuff that we know from other series that have kind of like, pastiched in, and say, okay, let's tell the complete, or let's stitch everything together so that game masters and players have the complete story of everything from Enterprise through Discovery up to the beginning of the original series. And let's make it all make sense, so that if you're playing a game set in that early Discovery era, or even like during the Federation Klingon War or whatever, that the characters understand all the backstory that led up to that point. And you also have enough information that you kind of know what's going to happen in that 10 years in between the end of season 2 of Discovery and the start of the original series. Like, how do we get from there to there? We need to bridge that gap, because, of course, we knew Strange New Worlds was coming. We didn't know what the subject matter was going to be. But if you look at the end of season 2 of Discovery, like, the Federation is still picking up the pieces from the war. They're still recovering. They're still rebuilding. How do they get from that point to the Federation that we see in the original series? Like, there's not really a perfect bridge there. And like the producers of Discovery, I don't want to say they didn't care, but like that wasn't where their story was focused, right?
Right.
They were focused on the discovery, and then what the heck happens to the discovery once they jump 750 years into the future.
Yeah.
So I knew as a game master, like I want that kind of detail. How do we get from there to there? How do we get from the end of how do we get from Section 31 and Control screwing everything up, and then we get to 10 years later, Kirk and Spock and everybody are on the Enterprise going off and having great adventures, and everything looks, kind of hunky dory. So I really kind of, encourage the writers, like, let's pull everything we know about Star Trek and dump it into this Discovery book so that we have this clear storyline from Enterprise all the way into original series, so that it all makes sense and it has a depth of detail that it's going to give game masters and players the opportunity to tell really good stories centered in that period of time. And hopefully it works. I don't know. I know the book's still just kind of getting out there now, especially in the States, but the PDF's been available for a while. So that was really kind of the design intention.
Yeah.
And I think part of me as the project manager and also being really well plugged into the fan base on social media, like I knew that there's a subset of the Star Trek fandom that doesn't like Discovery. And I've been picking at that, like why don't you like Discovery? Is it because of the characters? Is it because of the story they're telling? Or is it because of the setting that is presented in? And haven't really found a lot of good answers, but what I suspected is that they didn't like the particular story that was being told with a particular group of characters. And I was like, fine, let's write this book in such a way that you could ignore what's happening to the Discovery, ignore what's happening to Burnham and to Stamets and to everybody else, and just looking at it from a setting perspective. Here's what's happening in the Star Trek setting in this period of time. This is a great period of time to play adventure or to play a role-playing game and to do adventures, because there's just so much stuff going on. They're still pushing the boundaries of the Federation. They're still adding new worlds to the Federation all the time. It's still a young organization, still growing. They've come out of the Romulan War. They're rebuilding. They've got all these new spaceships. It's not just the Constitution class, right? It's all these other classes of ships that we see in the first season of Discovery, which I think was great, because I think, if you didn't have the Franz Joseph technical manual and you just watched the original series, right, there's really only one class of ship. Like, it's just the Constitution class. Really? This is a big federation and Starfleet's this big organization, and they only have one class of ship? That can't be right. There's got to be more. They just didn't show them to us because they didn't have the budget probably to do a whole bunch of models, right, and do a bunch of kit bashing. But the Discovery team added like 12 or 13 new classes of ships. And I was like, oh, this is awesome, because now we have all these new classes of ships that are operating side by side with the Constitution class. This gives players and game masters that many more opportunities to tell stories in this period of time on whatever darn ship you want to pick. Just pick one out of the book. They're all really cool, or different and interesting, and then go tell stories. And so that was part of my design philosophy too. Is like, there's this setting of Discovery season 1, season 2 is really, really cool, and just full of story potential. And it's a new part of the franchise that we really haven't seen before. And so they're kind of like narrowing that gap between Enterprise and the original series by dropping in Discovery here. And then of course, Strange New World's going to continue it, right? But yeah, so really that's just some of the stuff I've been thinking that I have to think about as I'm developing these books. Is it's not just a resource for more tools. It's like making these things actual references that try to tie in all that canon stuff as much as possible to make the overall tapestry of the franchise make sense. And we're lucky too, because we get to drop in secondary canon references too, right? If there's something cool from a novel or a comic book or something else, and we can drop in Easter eggs to just add that extra layer of franchise reality, right? That just fans love that stuff. Like they eat up the Easter eggs when they find them. Anyway, so I'm gonna take a breath because I know I've been
that's really
that's great. It's interesting you brought up. When Discovery came out, I resisted, because one of the first things I saw was the spore drive, and I'm like, okay, that just doesn't make sense to me. I'm just not interested. And the more I watched it, and the Klingons look different, the Klingon ships look different, it felt to me like another Kelvin timeline series. But as more I went along, the more I was wrong. The more I realized how wrong I was. And so when the book came out, I was very happy to see the material, just because that fits, like you said, that fits in an area that we just we didn't have a lot of information on from a series perspective. So kind of a general, me, I tend to go off on tangents. From a generalized question, correct me if I'm wrong, you had Utopia Planitia and Discovery going on at the same time in terms of development. Ignoring anything else that we don't need to talk about, but just those two books, correct me if I'm wrong, you were actively, in effect, project managing and dealing with writers on both at the same time?
Yep.
Simultaneously? How do you handle it?
Well, hold on, and other books presumably at the same time.
Well, I wasn't going to ask that. I was just.
Well, we're not asking questions, but I mean, you've said this before that you got multiple projects simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just part of the project manager life, right? I mean, I think Brad, you mentioned you're a project manager, right? So you're familiar with you have multiple things going on at different levels at different times, and just by virtue of what Star Trek Adventures is as a role playing game line. We have multiple products and multiple things going on, right? So obviously we're doing a number of print releases every year. We've also got a robust digital release schedule.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to maintain the release schedule that we have and then do one thing at a time. There's just no way, right? We couldn't possibly work on one book and then one digital product, and then another book, and then another digital project. It's all got to be done simultaneously. I mean, not all of it, fortunately. But there's any given time I'm working on several different products at the same time. And they're all at different levels, right? Like normally, I don't edit more than one book at the same time, like one big book.
That's
at the
what
same
I was wondering.
time. There's just not enough time in my day. Like I still have a day job. I still have a family. I still have other outside pursuits beyond this. But I will admit that Star Trek Adventures does take up the bulk of my free time, which I'm okay with, obviously, because I'm super passionate about the franchise and I love the game and I love my fans. I love our fans. Our fans are so great. And I love talking to folks like you because you are passionate about it too. And so it's really sustaining and it's gotten me through some really dark times over the last 6 years. Not just COVID, but just everything else is in the world. And so it's I'm grateful every day. Like every day, I'm reminded how grateful, lucky I am to be in the position that I'm in. But anyway, that being said, I when I was working on Discovery, I was working on Discovery. Cutting the writers loose to go work on it. We were also developing the initial part of Utopia Planitia. We also have several other books that we're working on right now that'll be out in 2023 and 2024. And in addition to all that, I've also got all the different digital stuff. So we had crew packs that we were working on, like we had the Discovery and Picard crew packs. Those came out earlier this year. And then we're doing a regular stream of standalone adventures and mission brief packs, right? So there's all that stuff. So that's, you're talking, I'm not sure the fans have necessarily been paying attention because I don't hear a lot about it online. But like we've been releasing something new every month this year, like consistently. It's either been a standalone adventure or a mission brief every month. And we've also been dropping in those crew packs, the Discovery crew packs and the Picard crew pack, in addition to the big print releases. So I think, I don't want to say the fans are spoiled because I don't get that sense from anybody on social media that they're spoiled. But I think they're always surprised when something new comes out. Because we don't really announce the digital stuff. It just comes out on a Wednesday. Right? We made Wednesdays kind of the Star Trek release day every month. But a new crew pack will come out, or a digital adventure will come out, or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, there's a new adventure out," or "Oh, there's a new mission brief out," or something. I'm not sure everybody's quite put together the fact that we are intentional about releasing something new every month, which is funny because it's just this machine now that's just kind of cruising along. And my team and I, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I finally got to the point now where I'm on a rhythm. And importantly for me, especially, is I'm no longer behind the 8 ball. There was a long period of time, especially right before COVID and then heading into COVID, where we were just trying to get stuff out as quick as possible, just cranking out product. And we gradually took a step back a little bit and said, you know what, if we take a little bit more time, this is project management 101, right? You take a little bit more time on the front end, the back end gets easier, or the end result is better. And so I've gotten ahead of the program here quite a bit, to where I'm working on covers and art for products that you're not going to see until the end of next year. So I'm further ahead of the curve now, and it's just been a process. It's just been a process of getting there. But I mean, I can tell you, like literally today, I directly touched or was involved in 7 different Star Trek products, major and minor alike. And that's just the nature
Oh my
of
God.
project managing this thing, is like there's so many different things at so many different levels. I mean, some of it might be just like, okay, I need to do a final proofread on this layout for this mission brief. That's an hour. That's not a big deal. Or I got this other book that I need to do some deeper copy edits on. Okay, that's a different kind of time commitment. Glancing at somebody's covers for a new product, it's like, okay, that, looking at art is pretty easy compared to a 50-page document. It's just a different level of effort. I mean, it still involves focus and dedication, but it's different to look at a piece of art and go, yep, that piece of art's good. I can send that off to Paramount. Or I can look at a piece of art and say, oh, this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed, and I can send it off. That's a different level of effort compared to, okay, I got to copy edit this thing, and it's going to take me 8 hours to go through this thing and do the detailed comments and get it back to the writer and all that stuff. But I mean, that's just my life as the project manager and the line editor for this thing. Is we constantly have 7 to 10 products going on at any given time.
Well, you're not just a project manager. That's what's why I bring that up is maybe selfishly, because like we've talked about previously. I have a background as a PM, but as a really kind of a pure PM. In some cases, I'm my own resource for projects. But you, in effect, for those that are project managers, if you were drawing a Gantt chart and a resource chart, not only are you the project manager, but you're also resources when it comes to proofreading, editing, and so on. Yeah. So it's not as, and that's what I guess I wanted to point home is, and again, I'm not trying to butter you up or anything like that. It's fascinating to me how you can manage 7 products, like today, also be a resource with due dates on products, and also managing and PMing that. It just doesn't, it to me, that's fascinating, because I don't know how I would do that. I'm a tech PM by nature. I've done enterprise large projects, but I haven't done it like what you're doing. And we've talked about this before, and you can smack the screen and let me know I'm wrong. Modiphius runs very efficiently when it comes to staffing. You aren't, it's not a staff of bloat. You aren't a bloated staff. You have a day job. So you're doing this at night. So, and I would imagine your writers in many ways are, obviously this is not their sole writing projects that they're working on either.
So, they're all freelancers with their own careers and their own things going on. I mean, I think every one of them has a day job in addition to doing the freelancing on the side. I think that's just, I don't want to say that's the reality of the RPG industry, but I think the vast majority of people working on RPG products are doing it freelance. I mean, there's certainly full-timers out there. And Modiphius has a staff of like 70 different people, most of which are technical and doing a lot of stuff. I mean, they do have project managers who are on staff. I just happen to be the freelancer. I'm the odd one out. I'm the only freelance project manager, but I'm also I don't do everything that they do, because they're responsible for multiple lines. I'm only responsible for one. Like all I do is Star Trek. That's my sole focus for Modiphius. And honestly, I don't know how. And I don't want to pat myself on the back. That's not what we're here to talk about. But I haven't really stopped to think about how I actually do what I do. Like being able to break out 7 to 8 different products at a time, and
that's what I was curious about,
and bounce from one thing to another thing. I think just over time, and this isn't just Modiphius, this is just my day job and stuff. Because I used to work, my day job used to be working on government proposals and being a proposal writer, and then becoming a proposal manager. And the nature of that work is you're hyper focused on a thing for a couple months, and then you have to purge your brain and start fresh on the new one, because there's a new proposal coming in, there's a new one and the new one. And it's just a constant churn of new stuff, and it's all kind of like, I mean, it's all the same really in a certain degree, because like government contracting and RFP procurement, like it's the same format, right? The government has mandated how your proposals are going to look when a government agency sends out a request for proposal.
Right.
There's a certain structure to that, so it's consistent. And then when you're working for a contractor, like depending on what kind of work you're pursuing, you're always going to quote the same 5-6 path performances that you've done a million times. You're just changing the format to fit the new RFP, right? So it's like this, it's the project, so it's a similar project over and over and over and over again. And I think by doing that for so long, I learned how to have a really short memory, so that when I go into a new project, I've forgotten everything I did about that last project, except maybe some lessons learned, right? We always try to do lessons learned. nobody ever does lessons learned very well, because you always are on to the next thing. You're always churning on to the next thing. But I think just that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to be hyper focused on this project for 2 months, 3 months, however long it takes, and then I'm going to forget it and go on to the next one. I'm going to be hyper focused on that for 3 months and then forget about it, etc. So it's something like that, I guess. I don't know, because like every project for Star Trek Adventures anyway, I know is going to end at some point, because like once we get that final layout done and it's off to production, or it's delivered to Drive-Thru RPG and the web source, it's done. I don't have to look at it again. I can go on to the next one. In fact, I'm probably already on to the next one. So anyway, I'm rambling again, so I'll stop.
No,
I have 2 questions, but I'm going to save one for the end. And Jace, I'll let you go, because I want to talk about the digital products that come out. But I'll defer Jace, because I've been kind of hogging the
No, not at all. Well, I mean, I appreciate it though, because it's so maybe this will be 2 minutes, and maybe we'll call it a day tomorrow. But so let's talk about the future for a moment. Obviously, we don't want you to cross the line, and we know you wouldn't. It goes without saying, we want, in such a painful way, a Picard book. But like you said, you've got multiple projects in the works, like whatever the timeline is. And I'm curious. I mean, I have a bit of a silly question, but more seriously to start, to whatever extent you can or are comfortable saying, the Starfleet Sourcebook, the Utopia Planitia Sourcebook, that just seems so significant of a project. I mean, my God, is that a piece of work? From the creative side, whether the writing or the editing or just the management, how do you determine what comes next? Is it more an element of pragmatics, like, well, these things are probably going to sell and keep the line afloat, and or are there projects that you really would like to do now that you've accomplished this, and some of them are feasible? I mean, how do you work that out? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, well, I think you put the keyword right there in your last little bit there. It's the feasibility. I think we're at a mature point with Modiphius where we whether it's me coming up with the ideas. Now, of course, I've told you guys at length prior. I had a wish list coming into this that of products that I knew I wanted to see, because I'm a game master. I've been a lifelong game master. I've been a Star Trek fan forever. Like as a Star Trek game master, I know the products I want to see. Right, I know the stuff that I want. I want a monster manual. I want a big alien book. I want a big species book. I wanted a big starships book, and I want books about each of the series. Right, I want an original series book. I want a next gen book, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I've got this huge wish list that hasn't gone away. Like I've still got it. I've been checking off stuff gradually or morphing things around, but I've still got this wish list. And so what happens is I will put together a feasibility study. Which sounds boring and corporate, but that's the reality, right? Because we can't just make stuff and throw it out there over the transom. We have to especially now that we're 6 years into it, we have to have a good business reason for doing stuff. Right. And so I'll put together a feasibility study, and I'll do the dreaded budget spreadsheet. And if I can make it work within everything that Modiphius tells me to make it work within, that'll go to my team lead and the leadership at Modiphius, and we'll talk about it. And if it makes sense to do it, then they greenlight it, and I'm off and running. I'm off into development. Sometimes they will say, "Oh, you know what? From a business perspective, we want to do this thing, and can you go do a feasibility, see if you can make it happen within certain constraints, whatever constraints they come up with." And I'll go explore that and figure it out. That's mostly for the big rocks, the big print products. For the most part, they've given me free reign to do the digital stuff because it's really low risk. It's low risk, low cost. They have consistently broken even or done better, and there's so much upside to doing them because the mission briefs are free, so that's goodwill with our fan base. Because you're getting free stuff, like you're getting a consistent stream of free stuff. That doesn't suck. Everybody loves free stuff.
Oh yeah.
Not to mention the fact that we're giving out these 10 episodes, every other month. We've got over 200 episodes now worth of content out there, and that's unreal. I just figured that out the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, we've written over 200 episodes.
I did not
that's
realize
crazy.
that.
So like it's just a wealth of material out there. But so the adventures and the mission briefs, what they also do is they're kind of a I don't want this to sound dismissive, but I don't have better words right now. It's kind of a proving ground for new writers because they're low risk and because they're low impact. I can commission a bunch of mission brief packs or a bunch of standalone adventures, and I'll tell the writers, look, I'm not giving you a deadline. I just want to see what is your passion? What are you passionate about? Do you really want to do this? And of course, you're going to get paid and everything once it's all said and done. But like, I want to see what they can do, and I'm giving you the opportunity to write for the line. Show me what you love. Show me your love for Star Trek. Show me that you can be a good freelancer and get this stuff done on time at a certain level of quality that I can work with you and help you be better, and then get it done. So for me as an acquisitions editor, right, because that's one of the many hats that I wear as part of this thing, is getting new writers into the industry, right? And a handful of them have gotten their start on Star Trek Adventures and then have gone on to work on other game lines, which is A, great, but also B, kind of sucks because that means they're not as available as they used to be. And so I'm losing some of my writers to other game lines, which is okay because it still feels good for that to happen.
Yeah.
Where was I going with this? Shoot.
You were going to tell us what the next 3 books are, but nice
segue.
So close. Before I kick it back to Brad, though, but just to go with this a little more. So, I mean, you guys have you have the Picard license, and I just assume you want a Strange New Worlds license. I mean, I can't imagine why. Yeah, I can't imagine. Okay, so I'm curious. Are you interested? This is a 2-parter. Indulge me here. Creatively, are you interested in Lower Decks and Prodigy? And I guess I'm more curious. Would that be different for you and your writers than the other shows? Or does the fact that they're animated just not matter?
I'm hands off on this one. I don't want to.
No, I'm not. I don't know.
It's Jason's fault if he crosses the line. Jim,
I think Jim gets me. I don't care about the answer to. Yeah, we're working on those. I'm curious to take something like Lower Decks and Prodigy as a viewer. It's Trek, but obviously it's qualitatively different. And I'm curious from the writing and editing standpoint. Would you write for those in Star Trek Adventures differently, or how, or does that not even matter, converting something like that over? I mean, it's still Trek.
Yeah, we've been thinking about this a lot because obviously we would love to add everything to our license. We would love to have Strange New Worlds. We would love to have Prodigy. We would love to have Lower Decks because they're the shows that are out there on air right now.
Yeah.
They're out there gaining new fans, and that's just from practical standpoint, that's a fan base that we would love to tap into.
Right.
And introduce the game to and get even more people playing the game and enjoying it. I think just the very nature of Star Trek Prodigy and Lower Decks, I think just the nature of those shows would require us to change or not necessarily change our approach, but would require us to rethink how do we present the content, right?
Yeah.
I think Prodigy very clearly aimed at a different demographic than we traditionally aimed at. You're instead of the 18 to 50, 18 to 60 demographic that most RPGs are aimed at, because that's especially even 18 to 25 is D&D's kind of bread and butter, even though they've got longtime grognards like us who still play the game, but get into the edition wars and all that stuff.
Right.
But Prodigy, very clearly, Paramount and Nickelodeon have been very clear from the very beginning that is aimed squarely at the 7 to 12 age range, right? And I think if we were to do a Prodigy game, we would have to do the same thing. We could not possibly write Prodigy aimed at the 18 plus demographic because we'd be missing the charm of the show, right? The whole point of the show is to introduce new fans to not just Star Trek, but also to STEM and STEAM technologies and education and learning and teamwork and self-reliance and all these great soft skills that you need to have to survive. So I think those 10 episodes of Prodigy are just amazing, and my kid's starting to watch him and he's like, he's getting into them, which is great.
Yeah.
But I know in the back of my head, if we were to do a Prodigy product, it would have to be written very differently, and it would have to be presented very differently, because you can't ask a 6-year-old to read a 300-page core book because most of them can't even read anyway, right? You'd have to change the
Right.
presentation somehow so that they could actually get it and
Yeah.
tap into their innate storytelling that they
Right.
can bring. Because like my son, like he's just starting to learn how to read,
Oh,
but
that's cool.
he is an avid storyteller because we've been reading to him his entire life. He
Mhm.
absorbs story. We watch TV sometimes. We read to him every night. So like he's got story in his brain, and like he'll just and we play a lot, right? We play Legos and all the other stuff, and he'll constantly be telling stories about things. And like as a game master, if I can tap into that creative storytelling thing that he's got going on, it doesn't matter what the rules are. We can just tell a great Star Trek story, and he gets it, right? He gets the basics of it, and that's what I think we would need to do with Prodigy is figure out a way to simplify the rule set so that we can present it to a new audience. And then for Lower Decks, of course, it's Lower Decks is certainly Star Trek to its core, and it's such a huge, beautiful homage to Next Generation, especially. But they dropped so many Easter eggs to literally everything else, like especially the animated series and the original series. But I think Lower Decks more than anything else, what we would have to get right is the tone, right? Because it's that very specific humor that even took me a while to get used to. Like the first couple episodes of Lower Decks, I was like, "What the heck is this?" And part of it was like I had never watched Rick and Morty, so I didn't.
Yeah, me neither.
I didn't know what level Mike McMahon was on with the development team. Like I didn't understand their level of humor, their quality of humor. And watching Lower Decks, like there was a lot of episodes in that first season that I was like, what is this? This isn't Star Trek. What is this? And it finally by the end of the season, and then especially in the season 2, I really warmed up to it, and then I got it right. I understood what they were trying to do with it, and I could see how much they loved Star Trek in every single episode. And there's so much detail in every scene. So if we were to be fortunate enough to get the Lower Decks license and then to do a Lower Decks string of products, we would have to make sure we got the tone right to get that specific level of humor and goofiness that is in Lower Decks that you don't see in Next Gen or you don't see in DS9 or whatever, because they're different. They're all different tonally. So we would have to rethink that a little bit. I think we would still make a Star Trek Adventures, right? It's still the toolbox that we know and love. We'd have to figure out how to make that tone different.
Yeah. No, thanks. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You brought up, you were talking about STEM, right? Before. And I'm just curious, not necessarily in that context, but I was just thinking about the different ways we've talked about in the past with our guests and ourselves, the different ways RPGs can be used, even outside of just traditional us sitting down at a table and gaming. Have you ever heard from anyone or talked to other folks who GM or lead games or utilize the STA resources in, academic, therapeutic environments or anything like that? I could personally see, Jason, I know you could see where that could be helpful, because Star Trek itself could be that way. Let alone the game.
Yeah, I've heard anecdotally from a couple people who reached out to me on Twitter or over email saying, "Hey, I'm doing this panel on the benefits of D&D and RPGs during the pandemic, and how playing online is helping people so much, like just connect with people and get over the isolation, or not get over, but like deal with the isolation and have some sort of outlet that's fun and not just being stuck at home alone, isolated, and feeling the pressure of the world closing in on you." And they talked about using Star Trek Adventures to kind of support that when somebody needs a break from fantasy and from D&D, which I thought was really interesting. I've had conversations with educators and education adjacent folks who are like, wouldn't it be cool if we could figure out some way to make like Star Trek Adventures accessible to the classroom, where we could develop like lesson plans and have teachers like use all the best elements of Star Trek in terms of like the STEM and the STEAM and the leadership building and the interpersonal relationships and the diversity and the inclusion and the equity, all those great values that Star Trek teaches at its core. And how could we use the game as a vehicle to teach that to kids in the classroom, right? And I would love to do something like that. It's just a matter of finding the time and the right people to put onto that project and to make it happen. And then also to get the investment from Modiphius, and then the sign off from Paramount. I'm willing to bet that Paramount would be all over it. I'm willing to bet that Nickelodeon would be all over it if we did it right. But in order to do it right, we'd have to have the right resources in hand. And I'm not confident we have that. Like, I know I don't. I've only got so much bandwidth, and I'm pretty much maxed out as it is. I don't know that I could take on another big, pursuit. But it's been on my mind for a while, and I would love to figure out how to make it happen, because I think there's just so much upside to doing something like that. And I'm not even talking about making money for the game or for the company. It's just like taking all the great content and like shipping it so that we could aim into kids and like help teach kids all these great life skills that they need, especially in this new world that as we're only going to get more diverse. And that's not going to change. And these are skills that you need to live and survive and thrive in this world, heading into the deeper into the 21st century here. So yeah, it's certainly been on my mind, and that would require some shifts in writing and stuff to really focus it on that kind of experience, as opposed to like a convention adventure or a standalone adventure that you'd play with your friends at a game table. Like, there's a different approach that you would take to a classroom environment. So I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I'd love to see it happen, but I think just time will tell what we can do with it.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you can't put 10 gallons in a 5-gallon jug, right?
No.
So, but the fact that that obviously you've put some time and effort into thinking about it, to me is awesome. And even for me, I mean, I have a teenage daughter. We were talking about this when we had some other guests on recently. The idea of even introducing my daughter and all at the Star Trek and even gaming and all that, can only benefit, because that's an area of need. I think about my kids, my daughter especially, going off into college and looking at study science. Jason, you have two. I have a boy. I can tell that there's a difference between, what my son's going to be offered and the comfort level with it versus my daughter.
Yeah.
So, hey, just one more quick question, and then I'm done. And this is another one, because you were talking about the digital products, and you were talking about how you can use it as a proving ground. Do you have some ideas? Do you kind of keep a theme going? Or is it just more, this is good content? I could foresee this as a mission brief or a mission PDF. Do you have any, methodology beyond just looking for really good content for us as gamers to play? Do you have themes? Do you even provide ideas out to? And maybe we covered a little bit in the past, but if we have, this is an opportunity for folks to go back and listen to the prior episodes when we talked about.
Sometimes I do have themes. Sometimes I'll reach out to a writer. I mean, and say, hey, I got this idea for a mission brief. Is this something that would interest you to write? And 9 times out of 10 they'll say sure, and they'll go off and write it. But most of the time, the standalone adventures and the mission briefs, it's just me saying, look, pitch me something, and if it sparks my interest, I'll do it. I think that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years now. Just within the last, I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 months, as we've gotten more strategic across the company about planning things out and planning further ahead. Like I said earlier, like I said last episode, I'm further ahead of the development curve now, so that I'm actually able to look further ahead into the releases that we're doing next year and then into 2024. And now I can start plotting. And now that we've got it established that we're doing a release schedule every month, we're doing a standalone adventure or a mission pack in addition to the big print products. Now I'm starting to get a little bit more strategic about, you know what? We're going to release the Starships book. I should release a mission briefs pack about the same time related to starships or space stations or something, so that it kind of makes fit. It kind of fits and kind of makes sense. It's not going to be perfect, but that's kind of like my thought process of like, oh, we're going to do X book. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a standalone adventure that came out about the same time that was relevant to that topic, or a mission brief pack or something? So I'm starting to get a little bit more strategic about that. And then also Modiphius, we're getting more mature in terms of like how we approach conventions, and we're building up the infrastructure now to where we can start doing more conventions, especially in the United States, more consistently. And we have thoughts about doing more convention support in terms of like dedicated stuff for conventions. And so I'm starting to think more strategically further ahead than what we have done in the past. So there is a certain amount of strategy in it. But like I currently still, for the most part, I'm taking pitches from people and saying, well, because partly I want to see what they're passionate about, right? Like it's one thing to say, hey, I've got this project, do you want to do it? I mean, that's kind of like me handing them an assignment and then going off and doing the job and then being done. It's a little different when they say, hey, I'm really passionate about this about this adventure on a space station that gets caught up in a wormhole and blah blah blah. All those things happen. It's like, okay, well, you're clearly passionate because you're coming to me with this idea, and if we tweak it, and then you can go off and running. So I like to see what the writers are passionate about and come up with the stories, because it's always a better product, I think, than if I say, hey, Brad, I want you to go write me a mission brief pack on Ferengi love songs, and then you dutifully do your research.
I would like to read that.
Done. I got the
Brad is.
I know they don't have guitars.
Brad is.
But
Look,
I'll
I
figure
said you were
something
gonna
out.
sing.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are.
Yeah.
Brad is getting his gold press latinum right now.
Nice.
Like nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing says love like a Ferengi ballad.
I have one more question when you're done, Jason. It's an easy one and it's a quick one because I know we're going to start running up against time, and Jim actually has to do some work tonight and sleep.
Oh no, I blocked off tonight for you guys, so I'm
we blocked it off for you. We figured we would be here a while. That's wonderful. Actually, I'm a little leery to ask you this question because I think the answer might be no, and that would be slightly soul crushing for me.
Mm.
But no,
Crush the soul. Crush the soul.
Back to your ballads. Right. No. Seriously, to me, just now that the Starships book is out, I mean, now that the third technical manual is out there, my life is a little more complete. And the next step for me would be, and I can tell you in my 20s, even my 30s, I wouldn't have been interested in this, but now, as you said, of a certain age, I find this idea so compelling. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I really was intrigued by Picard season 1. I would love to see something like a source book on just Federation citizens. Like, and let me rephrase that: not the species, right? Not like the worlds of the Federation. Is anyone in the world other than me, I mean this, interested in something like a source book on what's the daily life in the Federation, like not Starfleet? I realize that's probably too far afield for STA, but I would find that absolutely fascinating, because that's the part that the franchise has historically been terrible at showing us, other than like the drive-bys or hover-bys of Cisco's, restaurant and stuff like that. Do you think there's any interest in that?
There's certainly interest in it. I know that something like that's been on my wish list for a while, and I've heard it discussed a little bit on social media and on the forums, Discord, and all that stuff. That people are interested. Like, oh gosh, I wish we could learn more about the daily life of your average citizen, like Cassidy Yates. How does she get to be a merchant in the Star Trek universe franchise? With the Starfleet around, and how do you make? I mean, like, does she earn money? She has to, right? She's got to maintain her ship. So, like, how does that whole thing work? And I know they've always hand waved the whole money thing, and they haven't really focused on any civilians long enough to really explain it, which I think is a good dodge by the writers to not really focus on it. Yes. I think so. There's certainly a gap there, right? Because I don't think, like, looking at my shelf, I'm not confident. Well, maybe Last Unicorn Games did with their Raiders, Renegades, and Rogues source book for the DS9 subline. I'm not sure that there's been too many products that really focus on non-Starfleet, non-Klingons, rank and file, your average Federation citizen, and merchants and mercenaries, that kind of stuff. I mean, I think Last Unicorn Games, probably, if they did it better than anybody. But the challenge there is, like, how do we make it work? Yeah, right? And that goes back to the feasibility conversation we had, is that if you look at all the Star Trek series and all the Star Trek movies, with the exception of Prodigy, all of them are focused on Starfleet or Starfleet adjacent organizations. Now, I think DS9 is probably the one exception where you've got, you got Odo, Quark, Kira, very clearly not Starfleet people, civilians, or military, non-Starfleet military involved, and they're doing their own thing. And I think that's why we really tried to add a lot of content to the player's guide and to the game master's guide, to give players and masters options to play non-Starfleet, non-Federation characters and build robust games around them. And we even touched on that a little bit in the Discovery book too, right? We provided some content in the Discovery book about how to run independent campaigns, within that setting, within that time period. Because you got Harcourt, Fenton, Mudd, you've got independent traders like Cyrano Jones, you've got that kind of wiggle room of like how did an independent spacer survive when the Klingon Federation war is going on, right? Like how did you make it work? How could you possibly survive when the Federation and the Klingons are blowing each other to smithereens and destroying colonies left and right? Like how did the average people get by? And I think that's probably, honestly, I think that's a gap that the franchise has in terms of the TV show. There's never really been a TV show focused on your average civilians or your average political situation. I think there's an opportunity for that, but then you're getting away from like what is Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
And Star Trek's really always been about being on the ship and exploring strange new worlds. And it's a very different feel to do that kind of like day in the life of, you know, your average Starfleet personnel. So I think, you know, realistically, a source book doesn't, like, especially in print, probably just financially doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Usability wise, I think there's certainly, like, I could easily see that being like a digital product, like a nice meaty, you know, 30 to 50 page PDF product.
That makes sense.
And then release something like that and just see what it does. Like test the waters kind of, right? And say, okay, you know, we're going to throw this thing out, not throw it out there because we'll put, you know, passion into it, but like we provide it that way because it's low risk, low cost. Again, going back to low risk, low cost, and then just seeing what it does. I think the reality of the industry right now is that print prices and production prices are not ever going to go down.
Yeah.
And the distribution times are only going to get worse because there's just so much in the world that's getting in our way. I think I would be surprised if more game companies didn't start shifting to a digital focus on a lot of their products. And I know a lot of RPG fans are going to resist that because we love our hardcovers. Right? We love our hardcover.
No, don't get rid of print.
Yeah, it's hard to let it go because you need it. And even though PDF readers and digital readers and stuff are so good now, it's still a different feel than having a book in hand to flip through and look at those pages and all the beautiful artwork and stuff. So it's really tough balancing act. But anyway, so Jason, and long-winded as always.
No, it's great.
I would love to do some sort of product like that. It's just a matter of figuring out like what does it look like.
What's right
that makes the most amount of sense.
Right.
Because I mean, there's certainly no shortage of canon, right, that we could pull from.
Exactly.
Like you know, Jake Sisto and Cassidy and Odo and like there's so many characters that we could drop into it, like even Kess and Neelix.
Oh yeah.
You know.
But before we kick it back over to Brad to start to close us out, I just need to point out for our listeners that Jim, while you were starting to talk about the typical citizenry of the Federation, you included mercenaries. I just want to put that out there. That
on
the Star Wars side, Jason loves Edge of the Empire.
I wasn't even going in that direction. Yeah. I just think it's funny that, like, you know, in the Federation, where, you know, it's a post-scarcity society, right? That would be like a 300-page source book of an introduction and 285 pages that were blank because no one's ever figured that out. I mean, who knows? But I like that you're like, you know, citizens, pilots, writers, mercenaries. Your perception of the Federation must be a little different than mine, but I think that's awesome.
Well, I think if you watch, like, especially the later seasons of Next Generation and the later seasons of DS9, like, I mean, O'Brien got caught up in the Orion Syndicate a little bit there near the end, and you've always got your Nausicaans and your Packleds and your sinister batch of, you know, shady characters roaming the promenade, or that the Enterprise crew got caught up in the later seasons of Next Gen.
That's true.
It's like, I mean, clearly there are mercenaries in this organization or in the franchise, and then even further out, you've got the Fenris Rangers who are trying to keep things together on the edges. And there's this is probably a conversation for a later episode, but like there's some blurring there, especially with Picard. I thought where they were kind of like blurring the line a little bit between Star Trek and Star Wars, where like Free Cloud and the mercenaries and those shady characters they were getting involved with. I was like, okay, this is starting to feel like the prequels of the Star Trek, where they're getting into Coruscant and the underground of Coruscant here. Like
a little Mos Eisley going on.
Yeah, a little bit of Mos Eisley, and I think one of the things about me being a diehard Trek fan and really believing in the ethos that Star Trek presents is like when you start getting into the Edge of the Empire type of approach to Star Trek,
Mhm.
Like, I know that there's a set of the fan base that wants to do that kind of thing. Like, oh, I'm going to be an independent trader in the Star Trek setting. It's like, well, if you blur just a little bit, you're playing a smuggler on the Falcon, and
That's exactly right.
You're Han and Chewie pulling up to DS9, getting into shenanigans, and then the Empire shows up and all this stuff. So like, there's a blur there that we have to be really careful about. If we go too far down the independent route, then is that really Star Trek?
Is it really? Yeah. I mean, La Serena looks like, first episode I saw La Serena, and my immediate thought was, it looks like it was pulled straight from Star Wars. I mean, I think it's a beautiful ship, but it looks like it's pulled straight. And Rios, I mean, he's got West End Games brash pilot all over him. So no, I'm absolutely with you. That's a very difficult line for them to dance.
Yeah, I remember seeing the production pictures, like the promotional pictures of all the different characters, and like whatever reason, the one of Rios I saw, he had like the leather jacket and the shirt and the pants, and he had the holster strapped down on his thigh. I'm like, geez, this is like Han. I mean, this is literally Han Solo or a smuggler, right? And you were right, like literally right out of West End Games. This is the brash pilot, the smuggler, the even Edge of the Empire. Like I've seen this character a million times in Star Wars. What is he doing in Star Trek? Like, why is he here? I don't get it. So it's that little bit of dissonance, because I think in certain cases those two franchises have blurred a little bit, and if you don't really stay on top of the ethos for each one, then you get kind of into this weird gray middle ground. So Brad, I apologize. I think I cut you off.
No, I cut you off. I was just going to say, when you were talking about the citizenry thing, I think it reminds me a little bit, maybe different audiences, maybe similar, when BSG tried to do Caprica. And it just didn't fly. I know there was a theme behind it with the Cylons and everything like that, but no one wanted to see average day, down on one of the 12 colonies. And so I don't know if that would be the case with Star Trek. But okay, so to wrap it up, we have never done this. I'm putting Jim on the spot. We've never done this before. Jason's worried. But last time we talked, I think mostly offline, about some books that you've used in relation to technical manuals and all that. So we're going to do just a one-man GM corner this week. Obviously, you talked about the seven. Obviously, the stuff you're working on from Modiphius. You have a day job, you have a family, you have everything like that else going on.
But in your free time,
is there? What do you have on your desk that may not be STA related that you could talk about, that you're reading, or we've been talking about RPG as literature. I'll have an RPG book on my desk, just reading it, like I have Dune. I have the Dune and I've talked about it in the past. So anything on your desk as part of the GM corner that you would say that you're kind of working through, whether it's a novel or other RPG or anything like that. So I put them on the spot. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
But. Yeah, I feel bad about talking about it, because it like, from a certain point of view, it is kind of Star Trek adjacent-ish. I think over the last few months, I think I talked earlier in this episode, or maybe the previous episode, how I've kind of gotten ahead of the curve finally in my development process, and that I've been able to kind of like open up my schedule a little bit, so that I'm not just constantly grinding on Star Trek Adventures. I'm actually giving myself a little bit of breathing room, so that I'm not constantly churning onto the next thing. And I've actually gotten myself some time where I'm actually able to watch a little TV, or I'm able to read a book or whatever. And so really over the last two to 3 months, I've really gone back to my nautical fiction Age of Sail passion, and I've been rewatching the Horatio Hornblower series from A&E, the ones with Ewan Griffith and Robert Livingston, which is just, it's a great series if you're into nautical fiction and nautical history, and the Hornblower series, of course, the Forrester novels. So I've been watching those. I've been reading some Alexander Kent and some Patrick O'Brien, the Aubrey Maturin novels, just kind of refreshing my memory about all that great nautical, Navy war from the British point of view. But I'm also really passionate about the American Revolution, the colonial era. And I just recently reread a fantastic book by Ian Toll called Six Frigates. It's all about the founding of the American Navy and the first 6 wooden warships that the Navy built prior to the War of 1812. And it's fascinating reading, and I love it so much because it kind of made me think about what the engineers that the precursor to Utopia Planitia must have been thinking, like when they were developing those 12 Constitution ships for the first time, developing those ships. And it goes into a lot of detail about how the frigates were all built on the same basic idea, but each one evolved while it was in the dry dock, right? And as they were building them, they found ways to refine them individually so that by the time they all launched, they were all 6 very different ships. Even they were all, they were all the same kind of class. And that just made me think about Star Trek, of course, because everything goes back to Star Trek. Of course, you've got these 12 Constitution classes. They're all built on the same, principles, the same plans and whatever. But I'm willing to bet that every one of those 12 ships are different in certain perspectives. And of course, that gets into the talents and the traits that you can add to ships within the game context. But so anyway, yeah, I've been really, digging into my history passion and getting into the lower stuff, nautical fiction, and especially that 6 Frigates book, the Ian Toll book. And I've got more historical fiction and historical books that I want to get into, especially about the American Navy and the British Navy, because those have really been focuses of mine lately. And fortunately, that all informs Star Trek to a certain degree. But also, for the first time in 6 years, I'm starting to get back into thinking about fiction, because I wrote a lot of fiction before getting into Modiphius.
Right.
And then once I started working with Modiphius, that's really been my sole focus for my writing pursuits. And now that I got a little bit of breathing room, I'm actually starting to think about, what's my next book going to be that I write, or what's my next series? That's cool. Not Star Trek, right? That's something else. And so thinking about it, it's just very super early right now. Like I've still got a long runway of Star Trek stuff to work on that I'm not ready to let go of yet. I haven't burned out yet. Like I got close a couple of times during COVID, but I'm in a good place right now. So thanks for asking, though. I appreciate it. I have to. I know we're almost out of time, but I don't want to feel like I'm monopolizing this this whole thing. What are you guys working on? Just anything passionate that you got on your plate right now? I know at one point you were talking about doing an RPG for Star Trek, and then you kind of
we're never going to live that down.
I accidentally derailed you, and I feel
that's Jason's fault. Jason made me do it. Jason made me do it.
That's long gone.
Yeah, we're not. That's not even on the radar.
Wow.
I think we have. I've heard there's some material out there that kind of took care of it for us. So.
You probably haven't heard, but Modiphius has been putting out a lot of Star Trek adventures lately.
Yeah, well, considering I have a shelf full, I'm pretty aware of it, and I actually had to reorganize.
No, but in all seriousness, Brad and I, we do still keep playing around long term with the notion of pitching you another idea for mission briefs sometime in the future, and we're just biding our time until Modiphius releases Star Trek Adventures OGL, so that we can just go nuts.
Again, I don't want to burst your bubble again, because I know I did it before, but there's no
crush his soul.
I'm confident that we could never get that past Paramount.
Oh God, no!
Just because of the legal issues and the control of the property and stuff. But you two are welcome to pitch to me literally anytime. So don't
appreciate it.
The door's open.
That's sweet.
So,
but seriously, I mean, what's on my desk is your source book. I mean, is Utopia Planitia. I mean, that's not a quick read. There's so much to explore with that. That's a long-term one on my jam desk.
Yeah, I've had Dune. I picked up. I think I texted. I picked it up. I rewatched the '84 edition, which there's a lot of there's a real.
It's a good movie.
Yay or nay. I still like it.
Yeah.
Between that and then, and I say this not because you're here, but I've dug in, and I'm digging in deeper into the Klingon core rulebook.
Oh wow!
Because I haven't done that as much as I've done, the operations manuals and the quadrant, guides. And so I really wanted to. We talked about this last time, that really you've got two core rule books now that really kind of, in many ways, cover so much. Okay. I've focused so much on the original one, and then reading the other books. I wanted to do that, and I've been trying to get away from technology lately. Just at night, turning off the TV, putting a book
Decompress.
down, that I have found RPG material as literature very, very therapeutic. And having those up when I've been kind of watching DS9 again, that's kind of that's also a therapeutic thing for me.
Yep.
Having that material out there and being able to kind of engross myself in it is it's helpful. So, and again, I say that not because you're on here. I say Jason knows this. I've talked to him about it before.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yep.
just because we still don't have time to game yet.
Yeah.
And we so want to do that. And I think it's important, you know, just with us talking about writing and all that.
2024.
Yeah, I want to write. I want to play some as well, because that's the only way I can really envelop myself into the ecosystem. I use technical terms.
Yeah,
so
sure. Well, you know,
thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will tell you, like, I don't know how this will make you feel, but I'm actually a little bit jealous of you that you have the opportunity to get that therapeutic fix by reading the books and just absorbing all the content that we've worked on. I will admit, because I do have a short memory, because I have to, you know, purge my brain and go to project, that for whatever reason, I mean, I don't think it was intentional, it's just the way it worked out, but like the Klingon book was the first book that I really worked on as full-blown project manager and put a lot of passion into it. That thing was 400 pages. And then we followed that up immediately with the Shackleton book. That was another 320 pages. And then the Player's Guide, the Game Master Guide, each of those is 270 pages. Like, there is so much content that I've developed over the last 2 years that I have not had really, honestly, hardly any time to go back and just look at them and just appreciate them for what they are and just like flip through the pages. Like, they're on my shelves and I reference them once in a while, but like, I wish I had the time to just kind of like sit back and just kind of crack one open and just feel the faux leather of the Player Guide and the Game Master Guide and just appreciate a good book, right?
Yeah.
At some point I'm going to do it, but I just haven't found the time to do it. So I'm a little envious that you have the ability to kind of like kick back and just be intentional. Like, it's all intentionality, right? Like turning off the screens. I really admire you for being able to do that. I really struggle with that. Like, I'm on my phone all the time.
Yeah.
Because not just to keep, you know, an eye on my son if something goes crazy at school, but just, you know, working out schedules with my partner, and then, you know, work schedules and all that stuff that we get to do as grown-ups. But like, the more books we come out with, it's like, oh yeah, even the Discovery book was 200 and something pages. So like, you know, over the last 2 years, we've generated thousands of pages of content that I just haven't had a chance to go back and look at and enjoy. Like, I flipped through the PDFs, of course, but PDFs are a very different experience from a print book. And I was so excited. This is a non sequitur, of course, and I know we're trying to wrap it up here.
No. We're more cognizant of your time because you have 6 different jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy. But when the in fact, I know your audience isn't on camera, but like when I finally got my my copy of the Discovery.
That is beautiful.
The collector's edition of the Discovery book. I was like, I actually spent I changed my calendar around and I gave myself an hour just to kind of flip through it and appreciate how much work went into this. Like, the cover artist, Stephanie, the cover artist, did such an amazing job on this faux leather embossed with the gold and the silver trim. And I was like, I was just sitting there looking at this and I was like, holy cow, this is a really cool looking book. And I, you know, I was flipping through it. And, you know, I'll be you know, egotistical and say, "Wow, this came out really nice."
It did.
Even though I didn't have a lot to do with the layout, other than, you know, pick at it. But just to be able to just sit down for a while and just flip through these books and just appreciate the work that's gone into it. I haven't gotten there yet, and I got to give myself. I have to be intentional about giving myself the time to do that. And I just haven't had the bandwidth to do it yet. So I may have to use you, Brad, as inspiration to like unplug at some point and just grab a book, whether it's Star Trek or other RPG books that I've got just sitting around. I think
just give me a sec. I want to soak in the irony of what just happened here. Okay, I'm good now.
Oh, I got an itch here. Sorry, I got an itch.
Yes.
Yeah, I got an itch.
Audio only.
Jason just got the #1 symbol for me with my name.
Yeah.
But
#1.
No. You know, that is something that, you know, I couldn't imagine your schedule, even with my schedule the way it is, having to do that. It's at late at night. I'm up much later than I should be, just because that's the time that I get to do that.
Yep.
And I put some music on in my headphones or I have it silent. So, but yeah, I appreciate the material. And again, I don't want it to be a fanboy discussion, but I appreciate the material as reading literature alone.
Yes.
Being able to page through it and just read the content, and having talked to you and all that, know the work that goes behind it.
Right.
The research and the work and the collaboration with folks. And I'm very anxious to see and enjoy the same thing when Utopia Planitia comes out, and when we get it.
Print,
and we're lucky now that for those of us that pre-order, and if you pre-order, you get the PDF.
Right.
So you don't even have to wait. If you're able and willing to take a look at it in PDF form, you have all the content there.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I think I said it in the previous episode. You can use the content now, even while you wait for the book to come.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean that's the cool thing about digital books, right? Is like the tools are there. The tools aren't going to change if they're in digital format or print format. I mean, it's certainly a different way of accessing them, right? But the tools are done, ready, and available. So don't hesitate. I mean, I know it's tricky right now because the PDF by itself isn't available yet until we start releasing the print editions. But anyway, just go check it out. If you feel like it, go check it out, because it's just a wealth of new material.
My God.
I think it was 250, another 256 page book, another big monster book. I gotta figure out how to make the book shorter.
No. We're good with the
we're okay with it. If you're okay with it, or we're okay with it too.
I'm okay with it,
because we're the only ones that matter, right, in this conversation.
We knew this was going to be special when you messaged us before the release, and you're like, I hope your laudanum is ready.
And just for record, we purposely don't talk about, there are no spoilers for us. We don't know things ahead of time, other than, did you check your email? You'll say, did you check your email when the announcement comes out? And then this was the first book that I can remember that Jason and I were both going to get, that Jason beat me to pre-order.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I was in a meeting early in the morning, and I think, Jason, you emailed me or texted me at 9:00 saying I've got it ordered.
I had planned. This is where I had planned, like, okay, I'm checking just in case something comes early. And then, like, I got up in the morning and I was checking every hour, knowing I'm not going to get the hard copy for a while. Oh my God, as soon as that was available, it was just take my money.
Platinum.
And and totally worth it. I mean, everything with Star Trek Adventures has been like that. But I seriously think you and your team are no pun intended, upping the game of what you're producing as these books come out. I mean, they've all been obviously good, but it just seems that with every iteration, there are just differences that to me are palpable, both in layout, content, writing, organization. It's like every time it's just a little bit stronger, which is, to me, really saying something. I mean, talk about quality improvement. I mean, when you start that strong. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think as Modiphius has grown and matured as a company, and we've brought in more resources and good resources, it elevates everything, right? And like as a Star Trek team, we're getting smarter about how we're doing things. Like I said, I'm getting smarter as a project manager. I'm getting ahead of the curve. I'm getting things done more efficiently. It's just hopefully, and like it sounds like it is, because I'm hearing it from you guys. It's not me just saying it. It's hopefully showing in the product.
No
question. Like the Klingon book was really cool, and then we tried to take it to the next step with Shackleton, and then we tried to take it to the next step with the Player Guide and the Game Master Guide. And I'm just gratified every day when I read comments online from folks that are like, "Oh, when like new fans will come to Discord or to the subreddit or whatever, and they'll say, 'Hey, I'm new to Star Trek. I picked up the Humble Bundle. Like, what should I be buying in print? Like, what books are necessary?' And most of the time they'll say, grab a core book, either the Klingon book, the Starfleet book, or the new Rules Digest that came in the the tricorder set, and then get the Game Master Guide, get the Red Book, the Game Master book. And I'm like, wow, that's suddenly become like one of the essential books. And I don't know that I expected that to happen, but that's just the fan reaction, is saying you need to go get the Game Master book if you're going to be a Game Master. or go get the gray player book if you're going to be a player, because those are so relevant to the experience that the fan base is saying those are among the essentials now, which is kind of exciting because again, that wasn't on my list of things to do with that book.
Yeah.
We just wanted to provide more great content. So yeah, it's just we're trying to constantly challenge ourselves to make each product better, and I think I don't know if the fans expect that, but they certainly deserve it, right? Because if we just kind of like sat back on our butts and said, "Oh, we'll just throw out another book," and like you'd be able to tell that the passion wasn't there anymore.
Sure.
And I think that as long as we continue to be passionate about it, you're going to see it. And we're inspired too, because we're inspired by the fans, and we're inspired by the production teams, right? Because they keep knocking out awesome television shows. Like that season of Strange New Worlds was just amazing from beginning to end.
Okay.
The first episode of Lower Decks was pretty awesome too. So like we're just inspired by all this new content, and just
a total transparency here. So another friend and I, so we've got, hopefully next year, right? We've got a book on leadership coming out, and it's Star Trek. When Strange New Worlds episode 10, when that was over, we'd already been playing with the second eventual follow-up book for more advanced leadership. When that episode dropped and I could see that first season as a whole, it's like, okay, this is what we're doing, right? This series, this season is our widget, if you will, to really take the next step, right? Because that's the quality of what they're putting out now, right? Like you were talking about using Prodigy to teach kids. I mean, Star Trek is even more Star Trek today than it was when it came out, in the 60s. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it really is.
Jim, as always, go ahead, Brad.
No, I was just going to say thank you. You go right ahead.
No, I was going to say
Jim knows I'll say thank you to him, so he knows that I'm thankful. Yeah. So Jason, you can. Yeah,
Brad. Jim, Brad, for interview number 5, Brad's going to show up in his full Klingon cosplay. It's the least
better than Jason's Uhura outfit. So.
Okay.
Yeah, well, hey, legs are legs. On that bone-chilling note, we always really appreciate the time you spend with us. It's always so interesting because I think it helps us to appreciate what you are putting out there with STA even more, to know a little bit of the mind behind this stuff. It's just so cool. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your interest in your friendship. We wish you more free time to dabble in the nautical and fictional world, so that you can remain sane as you're 15 books ahead. It's just, thank you so much once again.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks you as always, Brad and Jason. Thank you for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough for everything that you do for the industry and just for fans in general. Like I listen to your podcast every week, every time it's on.
One of the 5 listeners.
No, we really appreciate it.
No, jokes aside. Yeah, thank you.
So I love you guys. Such a great, diverse group of guests, right?
We've been really lucky.
It's amazing how you pull these people, because it's like I'm a little envious of your Rolodex of people, because it's like, Erin McDonald. Damn, I want to talk to her. I want to talk to her. But no, it just I love your stuff. I love your show, and I'm just grateful that you've invited me again. And hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
You can count on it.
You count on it. You're going to come back. Yeah. We got to get you. We got to get you up there to Steve Martin level SNL.
I don't even know how many times he was on. I think he was in the double digits. So
oh my god,
see how that works.
We got plenty of time. You haven't gotten sick of us yet.
No, it's coming. Thanks so much, Jim.
All right, y'all. Take care. Be safe. Be well.
Well, it goes without saying that I'm continuing to read through the STA stuff. I should backtrack. We're going to GM corner because we've gone. This is a long episode. Mm-hmm. I will talk about the One Ring, and we'll talk about Dune RPGs in the coming weeks.
Okay.
I've been doing, just based off of us talking about world building and RPG is lit, I've mentioned the fact that I've been doing some recreational, I don't want to say writing, but recreational world building. Let's just say that.
You're using it, but you're not inhaling it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. I did not. I never inhaled.
You did not inhale. Okay, good.
Yep. And I've been reading a lot online more. Normally, I am more a paper. When I read something like a novel or something, I
Paper.
need to have the book.
Yep.
You know that is, you know, and in all honesty, and I say this with such respect, I really learned that from all of our time, to really appreciate the printed word as much as the electronic word.
They're both great ways.
They're
but
both great ways,
you
but
know what I think. Yeah.
yeah, and you've continually reinforced that with me, and I don't mean by preaching it, I just mean by your example. But I have been reading a lot online, and I don't mean like how-tos or that. I just been reading other people's work and other people's content, and there's nothing to it. It's just that's what's it's been on my virtual desk. There's a lot of people that create like online comics, online visual novels, and all that. And I will say there's content related in that realm that is more kind of like rated R oriented. That's not my thing. Yeah, shocker. That's
I've never
not my
known
thing.
you. I've never known you to be inappropriate or off color.
Oh yeah,
It's
ever.
surprising.
Yeah. How many E episodes have we had yet? Probably not as many as we probably both expected.
That's because we don't hit record until it's out of our systems.
Yeah, or we hold it back until it records done, and then it pours out of the system.
Yes.
But yeah, I stay away from that content because I'm more interested in the writing and the world building and the tension that you get from good writing, in material that is novel type material, story type material, but you could see, I don't know how to explain this, you could see how it could become really good role-playing story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have found this stuff out online in legit places. We're not talking like some of the seedy underbelly where you can get stuff, and I don't begrudge anyone that. It's just not my thing. So that's really what's been on my desk, and it has been fueling creativity on my part to the point where I do some writing. Something that you're really good at that I've been always interested and fascinated by, and is how you write still on paper when you plan things, do that even before you come to the computer and start. I know you're giving me a look, but you can't see it, folks, but you're giving me a look.
Well, I'm giving you the look that I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because by necessity a lot of that has changed. I still generally outline on paper.
That's my point.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, because everything I'm doing is collaborative right now. Collaboratory, please, because it's all collaborative. And after the outline, I'm probably in Google Docs.
Well, and that's okay, but you still, how many times have you shown me when we've been offline, like your world building model, which we're going to come back to,
Yeah, always on paper.
That type of thing. I've been doing that, but I've been doing it using pen to
Oh, interesting.
And I've been using my Rocket book, which we've talked about in the past, where you can write and then, in effect, air quote, digitize, to use a 90s term.
Right.
So that's really I've been doing a lot of reading of really good material out there from authors that we don't know about. And we may not ever know about in terms of, in the grand scheme of things, but just, it reminds me of how creative this culture and this ecosystem.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Ecosystem is.
I like that. Interesting. Well, I have something.
I know one more thing before you go. I want to come back because I told you before I had two things I was going to mention. I wasn't going to tell you. I think we need to come back and talk about in one of the next episodes, Artemis. We talked about it in the last episode at the end. You were talking about it, and if you all haven't listened to the last episode with Jim, please do. But at the end, we have a brief GM corner about going to space. And it just reminded me at the time of you and I were, I'll just date us. You and I were around 7 years old when Columbia launched for the first time. And I have because I was ill on that day, very ill.
Yep.
I
Home
have
watching it.
very distinct memories of that launch, and we'll have to talk about. We just had Aaron McDonald on. We've talked about space. We have to come back and talk about that again.
Brett, I think it's a great idea, and because we are still as of this episode, we are still waiting for Artemis 1 to launch. When she does, heads to the moon, I think it's fair, listeners, that we're going to take up Brad's idea, and whenever that is, the next episode is going to be not just on Artemis, but on space, on going to space, on the future, on our future as a species. There's a lot to be discussed there, in and well beyond role playing.
Well, and not only that, it just, even as you said, it just reminded me of, we have such great role-playing systems out there. Like I go back to Green Running's Modern Age. It would be very cool to do some world building and create a RPG universe of almost like, being part of a team that is going into space.
Yeah.
And on its, literally a modern age version of being part of an Artemis type mission.
Well, and okay, so instead of talking about what I was going to talk about for Jam Corner, I'm going to flip it around. So I think.
Sorry, I hijacked it.
And we're not going to do this, but it would be fun because sometimes I think through this lens still, and we've talked about this over the past year plus, but year and a half now. Wow. But it'll be interesting to look at the Artemis 1 launches, including when she does launch. And then as we're following her mission out to, around, and past the moon and back, it'll be fun just academically to look at the mechanics and say, okay, let's take our, where I'm going with this. Let's take our narrative dice. Let's take let's take our D20 with mods. Let's take our old school D6 and with our pips, and as events occur, let's figure out what kind of roles would these have necessitated, right? Like there's an issue with the phalange. It's a Friends thing. There's an issue with the phalange, and they figure it out, and they have to kludge it from space. Okay, great. So if we're in the old D6 system, because sometimes I still think like that, then what would have been the difficulty level on that? What would we have had to roll? Would we have needed the wild die? And on and on and on. That to me would be fun, but I think we probably should wrap this episode, because not only is it going long, really long, but you and I would be here all night trying to do this. Yeah. So, all right, everybody, you've heard enough from us. We really hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed speaking with Jim Johnson these past 2 weeks. Jim, as always, we thank you immensely for being a friend of the podcast, and more personally, a growing friend of ours. Everyone, be well, stay well. We've got more coming your way. One more week of Trek. We'll see you then.